I'm Corey Williamson, last year's state discussion meeting winner. I'd also like to introduce Mr. John Keeler Bibb, 2013 Young Farmer and Rancher Chairman. He will be our timekeeper today. About this discussion, Farm Bureau's strength depends on its members to analyze agricultural problems and decide on a solution that best meets their needs. The discussion meet is designed to simulate a committee meeting where discussion and active participation are expected from each committee member, as well as collaboration and teamwork. By participating, members build basic discussion skills, develop a keen understanding of important agricultural issues, and explore how groups can pool their knowledge to reach creative and important solutions to problems facing agriculture today. This afternoon's topic of discussion will be how do we encourage young farmers and ranchers to continue to be involved in Farm Bureau, and how can young producers lead even if they don't hold elected positions. This year we have 4 great contestants, and I'm pleased to announce each of them in order. Their contestants are Brandy Karish of Oktibbeha County. If you'll please just come on up as I call your name. We have Jay Hogue of Oktibbeha. We have Chad Swindle of Tallahatchie County. I'm sorry, the chair's going to block everybody. And Nikki Jeffcoat of Simpson County. Jasper County. Now that we're all seated up here, if you could please give our contestants a round of applause and welcome them to the stage. All right, contestants, once again, the topic is how do we encourage young farmers and ranchers to continue to be involved in Farm Bureau, and how can young producers lead even if they don't hold elected positions on boards? Contestants, in voluntary order, please make your 30-second opening statement.
The 2007 Census of Agriculture provided us with some alarming statistics that were covered by some of our Farm Bureau ambassador candidates. The average age of the American farmer is 57, but perhaps most startlingly, in Mississippi, the average age of the farmer is almost 2 years older, 58.6 years. If we plan on feeding the 9 billion population of the world in 2050, it's vital that these young farmers continue to be involved with Farm Bureau, the voice of agriculture that's so vital to making those policies that enable us to keep farming. I think we've got a great discussion and a great topic to talk about today.
Brandy, you make a good point, and I'd like to add to it, though. I think that for young people, young farmers and ranchers, if we highlight the important issues, then, by nature, farmers and ranchers are problem solvers because things break all the time on a farm and a ranch. So we're always working on something. And if you present the issues clearly, then farmers and ranchers, young people are going to come together with a common sense solution that works for everyone.
I found a quote from Helen Keller that says, alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much. And I think that speaks volumes, especially in this situation. If we can unify both the more experienced members and the younger members and come together with a common voice, then we will get so much more accomplished, not only in the board meetings, but when we're out in the community speaking and promoting agriculture also.
As I was young, I was involved in 4-H heavily. I learned their slogan to be, learn by doing. If we can get young farmers interested in our communities through workshops and others, get them involved, I believe they'll stay involved and take a role in Farm Bureau.
All right, contestants, we will now start the 30-minute discussion portion of the competition. I will signal you when there are 5 minutes remaining. You may begin.
Well, I think a good jumping off point for us to start with is just looking at the problem. Right now, we're all fortunate enough to be involved in the Young Farmers and Ranchers program, but once we hit the age of 35, we're kind of left out in the cold. Where do young farmers and ranchers fit after we age out of the program? And I know in Oktibbeha County, our county board is made up with an older group, and sometimes it's a little bit harder for young farmers to get the foot in the door. Chad, what do you think is a good way for young farmers to continue to get that foot in
I've
the
been
door?
very fortunate in Tallahatchie County that some of the older generation has kind of pulled me in, and I'm on the board in Tallahatchie County and serve as the Young Farmer and Rancher Chairman there. And it's been a short experience. I haven't been doing it long, but it's been a very positive one. And I'm very, very grateful, like I said initially, to be under the wing, so to speak, of older, more experienced people that know the business. They know the kind of family life that farmers and ranchers have. All those things are important, especially for a young person coming in. So I think that we stand on the shoulders of giants, to use that phrase. We stay under the tutelage of some gray-headed, more wise people. And if we do that, I don't think we can go wrong.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think that we have to make it, or it has to be a very welcoming situation to come into. I know whenever we started with our Young Farmers and Ranchers program, there were very few, and now there are quite a number, and it's almost an experience to where we are mentored more so by some of the people that are in our county board, and it's a welcoming experience. It's something that I look forward to going to and learning from them. And I think if we make it that way, then, or if it's made that way, then it's a positive experience for everybody.
Nikki, you bring up a really good point, and Chad, you also. I recently was fortunate enough to be involved with the American Brahman Breeders Membership Convention, and we had a speaker for our general session, Dr. Tom Field, who's the director of the Engler Institute for Agricultural Entrepreneurship at the University of Nebraska, and he made a really good point. He had all of the group, the men in the group, since he didn't want the ladies to admit to their age, stand up and said, who was under the age of 35 in that room? There were two people, two young men that raised their hands. And he made a point to say, make sure to that older generation that we don't make it cold for them, for us younger people that were going in. And you made a good point talking about talking about mentoring, Chad. I think we have to be so fortunate to be able to rely on the advice of those that have gone before us and the knowledge that they have that they can share with us. Jay, do you have some thoughts on that?
You know, in Oktibbeha County, I'm in the cattle business. There's some great people mentoring young people there. And I think as Farm Bureau and the board in Oktibbeha County, they know that somebody's got to be there to fill their shoes. And they just do a great job in mentoring everybody in that state.
So it seems like kind of the overarching question is, how do we get those young people to become members? And it seems to me that people become a part of something because they think that that organization is going to be some benefit to them, or it's going to help them solve a problem. So I opened by saying we need to highlight the issues. And for young people, some young people, they're not aware, they're not educated enough about the issues to realize that hey, there is a problem that needs to be solved. So if we can educate young people about current events, things in agriculture, their need to be involved, because if young people aren't involved in policy, then someone else is going to be involved in that policy making, and we're going to wind up with legislation that we had nothing to do with, and it's going to affect us probably in a negative way.
That's right. You know, it's easy for somebody to write policy up in Washington. You know, Dwight Eisenhower said, you know, it's easy to farm with your plow's a pencil.
Yeah.
So, you know, as young farmers here, we need to go back to our counties and get some events going, because, you know, it's up to us to carry it on. And if there's nothing, you know, events to show them what we do, Farm Bureau, they're not going to get involved.
Yeah, we're such a data-driven society. If we want to know something, we pick up our phone and we Google it, you know, and it's really a great thing in today's age that we have all that data at our fingertips, and we need to take advantage of that and use data to make policy and forge public perception rather than just how somebody feels or what they think.
I think you make a really good point. Young people today, there's so much, you have to show me what it can do for me. What are the benefits? What can I get out of it before I join in and start doing anything? And a lot of young people just aren't aware of what Farm Bureau provides to young farmers and ranchers, particularly in the policy development aspects, but just in getting us together and sharing so many ideas. The leadership conference that we were able to attend back in February brought a lot of young farmers and ranchers across the state, and Mississippi's a pretty diverse state. I know we all come from diverse parts of the state, and we all have different ideas and different things that work in different parts of the state. But I think it's really important that we always bring that back together, a way to bring those young people in out from the cold.
Yeah, absolutely. Go
That's
ahead.
true. And not only once we get them there, you have to be able to keep them there. I've discovered that more so than not. If you get them there and you have nothing for them to do, there's no constant a program or something going on, even if it's just quarterly, twice a year, something that they can depend on, then you're going to lose them.
Yeah, very good point.
I think we've talked a lot about that first part of the question about how we can get those young farmers and ranchers involved. And I think the second part of the question is kind of a little bit tougher to me about how can we get them involved without having an elected position, because it's really easy to lead if you're in an elected position of leadership. I think it's really important for us to get young people involved and kind of see what that older generation's doing and how they're leading. Jay, do you have some thoughts on how we can maybe get some young people to lead?
You know, that's a tough one to answer there. You know, as Nikki and them said, it's easy to get them involved, but it's hard to keep them involved. Putting on programs and workshops and all will get their opinions out there, and they will feel that like their voice counts, which it does. And that way they can go through and, take the transition into a leadership role when that position comes available.
I think we've touched on the second part of the question a little bit when we were discussing information, data, making decisions based on the facts. One way to lead is to lead by example. And just being an educated young person, other young people notice that, and that's leadership in itself. Being a conservationist, I know in the Delta counties, water resources is a huge issue. So for young farmers to step out and say, hey, I'm going to conserve water, I'm going to be a good steward to these resources, and I'm going to, even though it's a hassle, I'm going to write down exactly how many gallons of water I used. So 10 years from now, someone's not charging me 50 cents a gallon or whatever it might be.
I think it's sometimes really hard for young people to realize their place and to find their voice within an organization like Farm Bureau that kind of seems so vast at times. And I think one way that we can probably get them involved is to just start kind of at that grassroots, at that county level. I know a lot of counties have programs and committees that we can serve on, and I think it's important that we do participate, that we don't just say, I sign my name as a quota on that membership roster, that we participate in those committees and all those programs that our counties have to offer.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Brandy. I can speak from experience as far as our committee chair and serving on committees. Our Young Farmers and Rancher committee chair is hugely important. He is definitely a leader, and we just got done organizing a blood drive that we did, that just our Young Farmers and Ranchers did in our county, and it was hugely successful. And he's not, that's just a committee chair position, so that was definitely an important thing that he did to lead.
Another thing we can do to get people involved and stuff is use our social media aspects. Who here is not on Facebook, Instagram?
I'm not on Facebook.
Instagram, all that stuff. People see what we do through that stuff. And it's important to share our lives and our voices in agriculture because they see that. They say, hey, I want to be a part of that. And I think that would be a good thing.
I think that's a really good point, Jay, because, as young people like to see us as the face of agriculture, and we hear a lot that consumers want to hear about how their food is produced, and they want to put a face to that bowl of popcorn that they're eating or that steak that they've got on their table that they can say, I know that's a good person, and they raise that animal with confidence and integrity. And I think that's one way that we can go out, is to kind of take the lead on some of those social media aspects and telling our story to the consumers.
Absolutely. Just the simple advantage nowadays of having cell phones and things like that. You know, that's like in my county, for example, it's a really big county, and sometimes it feels like there's not that many young people. But when you really, if you get on Facebook or whatever it might be, or pick up the phone to start calling people, then all of a sudden you realize that there's people with your same interests all around you. So networking is going to be, I think, really important for our generation, more so than in the past.
Exactly, and it's so easy. I know I'm an extension agent, and from my standpoint, Facebook is almost the way that I communicate with a good many of my kids, because that's the quickest and easiest way to get them. And if we can put a good face out there for that, then we're heads and tails above everybody else.
I think social media also offers us a good way to kind of get back to that grassroots level, to kind of organize ourselves. And I remember back in 2011 when they were trying to enact the new child labor laws, and all of the agricultural community kind of banded together. I think my Facebook feed was Twitter feed, that was all it contained for at least a week-long period. Everybody encouraging other people to go and comment on that rule and kind of make some change. And it was really neat to see, going back and researching how big of a change we were able to make for the government to drop that rule completely and say we're not going to look back at it, because we as agriculture, we joined together. It's kind of one voice. And we were able to kind of make that movement to make them listen to our voice.
The only pitfall I see, I agree that social media is very, very important, but in our generation I see this one negative part is we tend to, we won't say, hey Joe, across the room, we'll send them a text message. And we've kind of lost that personal touch sometimes, and I think that we can encourage young people to bring that back. Write a letter, shake somebody's hand, call them on the phone, go see them in person. It goes such a long way with people when you're using good people skills.
And I think some of that kind of ties back to that mentoring that we were talking about. A lot of the older generation that we're hoping to get as our mentors, they aren't as technologically savvy. They're kind of slower to embrace some of that technology, some of those apps that we were talking about. Some of those things. So if you're going to get those knowledge and those ideas and all of that wealth of information they have, you have to go and talk to them face to face, and it's important for other young farmers to do that. What do you think, Jay? You look like you're about to make a good point there.
I was thinking the other day, I sell tractors, and I was going to get a contract signed by an old cattle producer, and we were sharing some of those points, how things have changed since he started farming. He's sitting in his computer and he's going to book some steers. And he said, when he started 40 years ago, they either had to come to the farm and look at them or simply send them to the local stockyard, and that's not the case anymore. And, he said, he needs young people to come about and help him adapt to, this technology.
So, I know this is kind of jumping back to the first part of the question, but I was asking myself this earlier today. What are the outcomes of being a member of Farm Bureau? I mean, I know that we all have kind of touched on that a little bit, but I guess if you were going to meet with a young person, you would say, you need to be a part of this because of X or Y. I mean, what do y'all have to say about that?
I think probably the first thing that jumps to mind for me is just the political clout that Farm Bureau carries. When you mention that name in Washington or you mention that name in Jackson, there's a lot of membership money and there's a lot of power behind that name. So Farm Bureau has a lot of influence on some of the policies that can affect young farmers on a day-to-day basis. I think that's probably the number one thing that I think of. Nikki, did you have another idea of another?
It goes kind of along with what you were saying. Farm Bureau influences agriculture as a whole so much that some people, and a lot of younger people just don't understand, even if they are in agriculture, they don't necessarily understand what Farm Bureau offers them as far as going to Washington and Jackson and lobbying for things that affect them on a daily basis.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jay.
Rules and regulations are getting heavier and heavier. Pesticide where, agricultural thing. And Farm Bureau is one of our only voices we have out there, and if you're not involved in it, you kind of, so to speak, like if you don't vote, you don't have a voice. And, if you don't get involved, you kind of got to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking, Nikki, and it seems that some young farmers are oblivious to the policies that actually affect them, and it scares me a little bit because I know that to be true, and I think that I don't know how you best educate people other than maybe social media is the best outlet. I don't know, but we've got to get the word out there of why these things matter to folks.
I don't know that there's one specific thing that's just the best ticket to educate people, but I have a child, or a 4-H'er, that's going to nationals this year, and this is going towards your comment about people being not necessarily as aware of things, and she is a very good public speaker. She was not, and she wanted to do, this was her last year, and she wanted to do something in public speaking. She'd done all the rest of them, so I put her in horse public speaking, and she's not very aware of all the horse stuff. So her topic is horse slaughter, which is a very hot topic in the horse industry, well, in any agriculture industry, but especially in the horse industry. And she has since gotten into that, and she's spoken at horse sales and all different kinds of venues, and she has now become an advocate for horse slaughter, and for whatever your opinion of that is, there is a necessary evil there. And so, but she was unaware to begin with, and now not only is she aware, she's making other people aware.
Yeah, that's a great example because I don't know anything about that. That's why I was smiling the whole time. Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
I think y'all make really good points about education, and I think it's important not only that we educate young farmers about the policies that can affect them, but I think it's really important that we educate the consumers that are influenced and pushing their legislators to make certain policies. And the horse slaughter one is one that I think was made with a lot of emotion behind it. People see horses as pets these days and don't understand that there has to be a way for the industry to have that floor, that bottom, some kind of way to dispose of those horses humanely. And we kind of go back to that, and I think Farm Bureau's done a really nice job with the Farm Families of Mississippi campaign of getting consumers educated about what agriculture in the state of Mississippi does for them.
That's right. A lot of people just knows that it shows up on their plate. The food shows up there on their plate. They don't know where it comes from. And the Farm Bureau, Farms of Mississippi campaign has been really great. It shows, where it comes from, who raises it. It puts a name, a face with that product.
Absolutely. What you were talking about, how that horse slaughter law, or is it a law, I don't know, had been passed with some emotion involved, and I think that is the case with so many things. People get very upset over touchy issues for various reasons, and it's our job as young people and everybody involved with agriculture to get the facts out there, the data, and whether that be collecting information on your own farms and ranches, whatever you can do to make it clear that this is how it is, it's not like this. It's, all feelings aside, what the facts actually are.
I think you bring up a good point, Chad, and I think it's really important because I think the most skeptical generation is our own. So if we look at those young families, and they're the ones that are questioning practices, and they're the ones that are questioning a lot. The millennial generation, like they like to call them, they're a very skeptical generation. They're skeptical of politics. They're skeptical of the food on their plate. They're skeptical of everything. So we've kind of got to find a way to bring them in and kind of show them the good side of agriculture, what we do, and how hard we work every day to provide that food on their plate and provide that safe, abundant food supply to them.
Yeah, and with our generation, with its faults, comes the if we go to Amazon.com and we hit sign in or order, we expect it to work when we hit that button. And I think that if we can show young people that Mississippi agriculture is safe and effective, then they're going to be all on board.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to the social media aspect that we were talking about. Not only are they skeptical, but they're skeptical about it, and they're vocal about it, and they're vocal about it on social media.
Yeah.
And so we have to be able to meet them where they are and to be able to non-confrontationally dispel their fears.
So is that a good way, do y'all think, to tie in keeping our young farmers involved in Farm Bureau is going back and hitting them on that social side, hitting them on that technology side, and encourage them to do those things? Maybe we need to start campaigning out to our farmer friends.
Need to make Facebook a prerequisite.
Yes.
I'm going to get an account right when I leave.
We're going to convince you by the end of this discussion.
I had
You're
one,
gonna
I
have
got
one.
rid of it.
I think so. I mean, I think it's a necessary, not necessarily a necessary evil, but I think it's a necessary part of what we do. I have to be able to function on it as a professional level also for the clubs and stuff that I have to be able to reach some of my constituents. So I think that would be definitely a way to reach a good portion of our people.
Yes, because, when you snap that photo or post that post or tweet that tweet, it don't just show up, in Mississippi. It goes worldwide.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point.
And I think that is a really good point, and we have to be really mindful of that and
That's what I was thinking.
remind other young farmers and ranchers and anyone involved with agriculture that when you post a picture that anybody in the world can
You're
see
representing us.
it. We host some programs there on campus at Mississippi State, and we're always really mindful to tell our participants, I know you're really excited about what you're doing right now, but we have to think of it in context, because what you and I see as an everyday practice, a housewife down the road might think we're doing something really bad. So I think that's another way we've got to get young farmers educated, is about perceptions.
Absolutely. Context is a great word to use too there. I mean, context is everything, and that goes back to the point we've all made. If, sometimes as a farmer, you tend to only have that 40-acre mindset. You're thinking about where you are, what you're doing, and if you network with people and you can open your mind up to maybe some different ways of doing things, new answers to old questions, then there's a benefit there.
One thing I think is important for us to kind of go back to on that first question is getting those young farmers involved at that grassroots, that county level. That's where Farm Bureau starts for all of us. And I noticed that it seems like a lot of our officers on the county level, those elected officials, they've been elected officials for about 20 years or so, it seems like. So I don't know if there's a good way that we can encourage them to maybe mentor another person, a younger person, to step onto that board and to step into that place. Is that something that, I know Jay's in Oktibbeha County with me, or Chad or Nikki, is that something that you think is maybe done a little bit more after you get out of that YF&R chair position? Excuse me.
Seems like in Tallahatchie County, if you just say we've got Yeti coolers and shotguns, everybody will show up. That works, or Costa Del Mar sunglasses, those things work pretty well. But yeah, those are all great points. For us, it's been about finding those people that will commit and put the time towards doing, being involved. Because not everybody wants to be involved for different reasons. Some just because they don't know what the benefits are. And that's the group of people I think that we can be intentional about targeting. Maybe the people that are on the fence and say, look, this is why you need to be a part of this. It's I think Brandy, you said it earlier. It's Farm Bureau is such a powerful voice, and we can leverage, this great group of people, farmers and ranchers, that have the great common sense approach, which Washington D.C. seems to be lacking so much. We have that group of people, and we need to be taking advantage of that skill set.
I think from our standpoint, whenever we were getting our group together that we have now, some of them just didn't think that it applied to them. They thought, well, I've only got X number of cows. I have a small farm. It's not something that necessarily I need to be involved in or that is going to affect me as much. And I think if we can get past that stigma that it's for large farmers or for older groups, then we can make some headway and get some younger people involved and keep them there.
I agree, and I think we're also fighting a battle too, especially with young families. I know, Nikki, you've got some young kids, and you get pulled in 18 million different directions. I know my husband and I don't have any kids yet, and we barely ever see our home in the evenings before 8 o'clock at night, if we're both there. So I think time commitment is another thing that we're fighting, and I think if we show those young farmers that they don't have to commit all of their time. We understand that they've got jobs, they've got other organizations that they're involved in. It's important for them to commit to Farm Bureau and to get so much of that benefit out of it.
We're very fortunate that, Mississippi Farm Bureau has such a commitment to family, and that we're able to be a part of it even when we have families. I'm very thankful for that.
Yes, I agree. If we can make them understand, or if it's given out in the way that the time that we do ask of them, we're going to make it count, then I think that we'll be more likely to get them and keep them.
I think that's a really important point, Nikki. We've got to make their time count. So that time they commit to Farm Bureau and the time they commit to being involved, we've got to show them that they get something for that time and they get something very valuable for that time.
I was just, as y'all were talking, I was thinking what might be some specific examples of that. The time management and having value at those events or those meetings or whatever it might be. I'm asking y'all because I'm kind of at a loss.
It basically goes back to the bottom line. Everybody wants to know, what is it in it for me? And, if you make them feel like, y'all were saying, y'all said it, it's, they getting something out of it, because basically, I hate to put it like this, everybody's selfish. With our time constraints, what is in it for me?
Yeah, it's great that Farm Bureau is, focused on the member and not necessarily itself as an organization, but I was reading the mission statement at the bottom of the pamphlet, promoting families and, so that we can all have a better life.
And I think that's really important, and I think going back to your original question, I think as long as we give them one thing to take away that they can maybe take back to their operation and say, I can make it more efficient, I can be more profitable if I do this one thing. And there's topics that can cover the wide range of agriculture, from row crops to cattle to anything across the board to poultry houses. There's topics that we can cover that can hit all of those that are important for all of those walks of life. Whenever I do a county program, it's always, I want them to take one thing home that'll make their lives better.
I think that's it. That's what I look for whenever either I do a county program or I have somebody come in and speak, is to make sure that, because I know that my producer's time is more valuable most times than mine because I've taken them away from their operations, and if they need to get something out of it, something to be able to take back and use or to be able to take back and implement on their farms. So if we could do that with whatever program's going on or whatever we are doing, if they feel like they have contributed to the community, whether it's a community service aspect that we're doing as young farmers and ranchers or whatever we're doing, if they feel like they've contributed in some way, I think that we'll be closer to keeping them as a group.
And I think all our Farm Bureau programs do a really good job of tying that family aspect back into it. I know I was fortunate enough to grow up in Louisiana Farm Bureau, and I remember going to conventions every year. That was the highlight of our summer, was going to Farm Bureau conventions and watching all those competitions and thinking, hey, I can do something like that one day. And I think it's important to instill that in those young people that we have coming up through the Farm Bureau system. Any last thoughts?
All right, thank you, contestants. That's going to conclude the discussion portion. Y'all now have 1 minute to prepare your closing remarks, and then we'll hear those again in voluntary order. I'll let you know when that minute is up. Thank you. That is your time for praying your closing remarks. Now, again, in voluntary order, please make your closing statements. Thank you.
Stand up.
You can stand up if you want to.
Okay. Well, I think one really positive stat that I found when I was looking up some numbers on agriculture these days is that the American farmer today, compared to the American farmer in 1940. In 1940, one farmer fed 19 people. Today, one farmer feeds 155 people. And we borrow on that use of technology, and we made, Chad, you made a really good point on earlier, we stand on those shoulders of giants, and we borrow from that knowledge of previous generations, and we can always climb up higher and higher because we're borrowing on that knowledge. And I think it's really important for young people, young farmers and ranchers to continue their Farm Bureau involvement, and we have to encourage them to play a part in Farm Bureau, because Farm Bureau is truly their voice of agriculture.
First, I'd just like to thank everyone for this opportunity, especially Tallahatchie County, and tell y'all what a pleasure it's been doing this. I really enjoyed it. And I said this earlier, but farmers really are problem solvers. And I think that that is something that we really should cherish and continue to pass on to future generations. And we can leverage those skills of problem solving to solve, even national problems, national issues. And I'd also like to say that when you're talking to others that might not be from a farming background, make the effort to be specific, go the extra mile to explain things to them. I think that sometimes we assume a lot of things when we're talking to each other. We all kind of have a common background, being from farming and ranching backgrounds, and make sure that you talk to folks that when you talk to folks that you're specific. Thank you.
I think most of what we've gotten from the discussion today is that to be able to get the young farmers and ranchers involved and keep them there, we've got to be able to inspire them and then find somebody that we can mentor them, that we don't lose them, and that they're not completely lost whenever they get there. And that, I think, is probably the best thing that we can take away from this, and we can take back to our counties and hopefully either find somebody when we get there and guide them in the right direction, or look for somebody that, or as if there is a board member out there that sees somebody new come in, look for them, sit them down, mentor them, that kind of thing.
I want to thank Mississippi Farm Bureau for what they've done for us and continue to do for agriculture. As I started off my introduction with, we need to learn by doing. And as we do, we have found a lot of things that work and a lot of things that have not worked. And as we continue to get mentored, as everybody up here has said, we need to mentor somebody else where the gap stays closer than it has. Thank you.
Won't y'all join me in thanking our participants on a fantastic job. As our judges go out to make a final decision, I'd like to introduce each of them. We have Dr. Sheila Petrie, a pediatrician and owner of Triple P Farm of Thibodaux, Louisiana, and Vice Chairman of the Louisiana Beef Industry Council. We have Ms. Kathleen Early, American Farm Bureau Director of Legal Services and Assistant Secretary. And we have Marty Tatman, American Farm Bureau Young Farmers and Ranchers Coordinator. I want to thank each of those as well. Again, I want to thank our contestants. They did a fantastic job. I think we'd had a few more moments. We could have gotten around to the health care bill and sorted it out as well. Why don't each of y'all take a moment and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Ms. Brandy Karish. I'm from Oktibbeha County. My husband and I live in Starkville. I'm an assistant professor in the Animal and Dairy Science Department at Mississippi State, where I serve as a beef cattle specialist, one of 2 beef cattle specialists for the state of Mississippi. And my husband and I also have a small herd of registered Simmental and Sim Angus cattle.
I'm Nikki Jeffcoat. I'm from Jasper County. I grew up on a small commercial farm where we raised commercial cattle and working cow horses. I still live there with my husband and my 2 children. I'm an extension agent in Lauderdale County, and I'm actually a master's student under Brandy. So,
Y'all had the upper hand.
I don't know about that.
I'm Chad Swindle from Tallahatchie County. I live in Sumner with my wife and a young son, and I farm with my father, about 2,000 acres of row crop, all grain. And I've been around farming my whole life, and I really couldn't imagine doing anything else. I'm just grateful to be a Mississippi farmer.
I'm Jay Hogue. I grew up in Yazoo County. I live in Oktibbeha County now. Grew up raising cattle and hogs, still do. And I work in sales at Wade Incorporated.
All right, thank y'all very much. The winner of the discussion meet will be announced at a later general session. Again, I would like to thank the contestants one last time.
On Saturday afternoon, we held the annual discussion meet with 4 great contestants from all over the state. Those contestants were Jay Hogue from Oktibbeha County, Brandy Carish from Oktibbeha County, Chad Swindle from Tallahatchie County, and Nikki Jeffcoat from Jasper County. Our contestants gathered to tackle the question, how do we encourage young farmers and ranchers to continue to be involved in Farm Bureau? How can young producers lead even if they don't hold elected positions on boards? Please give all of our contestants a round of applause for the outstanding job that they did. And our 2013 discussion meet winner, who will represent Mississippi and San Antonio, is Brandy.
I want to first start off by thanking my fellow contestants. I definitely didn't need to stand up there and discuss that problem with myself. We had a great group, and I think we had a great discussion. I want to thank Oktibbeha County Farm Bureau for sponsoring me and allowing me to come here, and I can't wait to represent Mississippi at the National Convention in San Antonio, Texas. Thank you.